Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Welcome to Rejuvi 45. If you have heard this phrase called modern leadership, and you have been introduced to a company called Rejuvi and the community called Rejuvi 45, then you are in the right place. We get together 3 times every month, Thursdays, 2 p.m. Eastern, and we are here to talk about modern leadership. And that is, to sum it up, the belief that we can help all leaders in all businesses become both compassionate human leaders and fierce business leaders at the same time. My name is Regina Hepp, and today I am joined by.
Rob Marhula. It's a pleasure to be with you again, Reg.
Thank you. We didn't plan this, but we're looking like we're wearing the Rejuvi 45 uniform today. It's awesome.
Yeah, it is great.
It is really great. So today we have a subject called Take the Village Team. And if folks are taking a look at kind of the theme picture for this, it is honeybees and they're flying into the hive. So before we get to talking about Take the Village Team and bees and bee analogies, I don't know if you knew this, Rob, but did you know that our Rejuvi's chairman of the board is a beekeeper? Harold Weens is a beekeeper.
I did know that. Yeah, that was one of the first interesting things I learned after becoming a part of Rejuvi.
Yeah, we are having a board luncheon tomorrow. So I kind of am secretly hoping that that we get some of this, we get some of his, some of some honey. He refers to it as gold. So I'm hoping that we get a little piece of that.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. I haven't had any yet, so
Yep,
that'd be great.
yep. Well, so the reason why I brought that up is, of course, as we talk about Take the Village Team today, and we take a look at our picture, there are these honeybees, and I want to I didn't know this, but as you get to know Harold Weens, again, he's Rejuvi's chairman of the board. He is a beekeeper, and so you start learning a whole lot about bees. And actually, I didn't know this, but honey is not only good for humans, like it can help detoxify you. I'm looking at this list of all these good things honey can do for you, but it can help you improve your tolerance to cold weather. It can help to detoxify you. It can nourish you. It does all these really. It can help you to heal more quickly. And interestingly enough, in reading this article of the value of humans consuming honey, especially honey kind of that has been grown locally and kind of close to you. But honey is also good for the bees themselves. And when bees aren't doing well, they will also consume a little bit of the honey. I didn't know that. Did you know that? I didn't
No,
know
I
that.
didn't. I didn't. I just thought they made the delicious honey, and that was the end of it for them. I didn't know they
No.
actually
They were,
partook in the honey as well.
yeah, they partake in the honey. And I think that that's just such a great thing to think about. And I want to kind of read you something and then we'll kind of get going with a modern leadership topic. But when I think about all that Rejuvi has done, and we think about the modeling and the analytics that we put in front of people, we've really designed it all to be like superfood, right? Because these things are good for a leader, but we also have found that it's not just that the leader that this modeling and this analytics is good for, it's good for the team too. It has this compounding interest. And I'm going to read something. This is an old quote from our partner Videothon Ready. And what he talks about, oh, here, I've got to get it out here, is when we built the quick to insight capability for leaders, we didn't just think about the leader, we also built it for their teams. because there is compounding benefits that are in play. Those compounding interests are like leadership superfood. So before we unpack that a little bit, since you do have a really strong finance background, if you had to talk about what's compounding interest, like how would you help someone to understand that?
Well, I would start by explaining what simple interest is. So simple interest is you have a principal balance and you accrue interest on that balance. When you start compounding interest, you take that simple interest calculation and then you add the interest. Well, the interest you're accruing as you go, you're compounding the interest on top of that. So you're getting more interest on top of your interest plus your principal.
Mhm.
So your money's making more money.
Your money, your money is making money, and the more money that the money is making money. That's compounding interest. And I love it's the power of compounding. I think that we hear that a lot, and I love this quote from Vid about how Rejuvi really thought about not only its modeling, but how we thought about its analytics for its modeling. It is designed as a superfood. It is designed to provide compounding help, not only for the leader, but for the teams themselves. And so I think instead of talking theoretically about any of this, you and I are going to share just a couple of screens today. And we're going to just talk about this whole idea of, modeling and analytics as superfood. What's good for humans is also good for bees, or the idea of, modeling and analytics has compounding support for the leader, but also for the teams that, of course, that surround them. So with that, let me share my screen, and I'm going to do a basic share here. Okay, you can see my screen.
It's coming. Yep.
Yep. And all right, so for those of you who are seeing us share documents for the first time, today, rather than log into the Rejuvi platform, what Rob and I did was we logged in, and we got a couple of documents that we needed, and then we're going to be opening those up just to save a little bit of time. And one of the first documents that we're going to open up here today is an output report. This is a Rejuvi Insight and Intelligence report. Let me make this as big as I can. Okay, is coming through good, Rob?
Yep.
So, we're not the idea of today is not to go through an output report. The idea of today is to actually go to the part that is compounding superfood for not only leader, but the team. And so because of that, you're going to go to the second page of our output reports. All Rejuvi Modern Leadership Out reports kind of have two chapters. One chapter is about leader insight. That's the think to drive stuff that helps you to become a compassionate human leader. Chapter 2 is the organization intelligence stuff. Those are the things that are going to help you with your build to sustain capability. It's going to help you to run a fierce business. And so we're going to go to that chapter called org intelligence. And when you get there, you're going to get a number of reports, and we're going to actually go to the team drivers report. Okay, you can take a look at that. You can see that.
Yep.
And I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to X out of the minis right here. I'll get back to it if needed. But I think before we get here, let's just do a little bit of explanation for the team. So we often refer to this as the backward Z.
Yep.
And the reason why we describe this as the backward Z is because a team will work through it as if you were writing a Z in reverse. So you are starting with intent, and then you are doing some business unit intelligence work, and then you are doing some targeting work, and then you are finishing up with some implementation work. So that's kind of how it works. Each of these quadrants has a number of business practices. So, for example, if you take a look at strategic intent, just like Simon Sinek says, strategic intent, you should start with why. Rejuvi believes you should start with a little bit more than why. You should start with vision, mission, and values. Where are you going? Why are you going there? And how do you choose to be as a people en route? But it's strategic intent isn't just those things, right? It's also this really good understanding of your competitive landscape, right? It's an understanding of how you know you're going to win, which is your value proposition. So in each of these quadrants, there are a number of business practices that are differentiating. This is how teams are actually going to become these business leaders who are fierce, right? They're building and sustaining. I mean, any other comments kind of about this, Robbie? You've heard me describe this so many times, but just from I think a practitioner
Yeah.
perspective, everyday Relio Trulio executive, how do you take this in?
Well, I think, from in my experience, what I've seen is, a lot of companies. Now, I'm going to say companies, not necessarily leaders, but companies talk about their vision, mission, and values. And I don't know that that always gets embedded down through the organization
Mhm,
as maybe it's intended.
mhm,
And I think, and I'm going to ask you a question here in a second, but I think the other parts of this, competitive landscape, to me, they're all kind of obvious things to know and care about. Um, but I don't know until I met you and the other Rejuvi team members that it was really part of intent. Those were, in my experience, things that were always there. We need to
mhm,
understand but as you're going into a project or trying to drive a business in a certain direction, looking at it through this lens, I think highlights the importance of it and the
mhm,
importance of not just at the executive leadership levels understanding these things, but as you push that down through the organization. Me as a finance leader, my finance team is going to have a little bit different um, part in all of these things, right?
mhm,
And it may mean something else slightly different in my part of the organization versus the sales part of the organization, for example.
mhm,
So I guess so. Here's coming to my question. So from a leader standpoint, for me as a leader, um, kind of in that supporting leadership function, and when you look at this, how is that different for I'll just say different types of leaders, right? Different leaders in different parts of an organization.
Ooh,
Is it different?
yeah, that's a really good question, and I think it gets to our topic today called "Take the Village Team," right? It's like you just the leader, the leader can't be the only one going to the beehive, right?
Right.
Right. It's got to be everybody. So I think first of all, is if you think about modern leadership, one of the things that we talk about is that um, more and more companies are asking more and more people to lead something.
Hmm. Yep.
And that has, but by the way, we're going to use this word compounded again. That dynamic has compounded since the pandemic. Oh, excuse me, for just a moment. Okay. The phone forgot to turn the phone off. So that dynamic of businesses asking more people to lead something has been not only a dynamic that we've seen over the past 5 to 8 years, but it has compounded since the pandemic. And so one of the things that we have to do is we have to take a look at how do we think about leadership, in these, for example, running a fierce business in these four quadrants. And how does it look different for these people who are asking to lead something inside of our organizations? And so, for example, what you see right now in the upper right-hand corner is the little product suite logo called Rejuvi Lead. What you're looking at right now are the business practices that an executive would need to really be aware of at all times inside of her or his business. Now, we also have products called Rejuvi Sales and Rejuvi Service and Rejuvi Team and soon Rejuvi Expert. So each one of these things are still going to have these quadrants that we are going to refer to as the backward Z. They are going to be, each of the leaders is going to be thinking about strategic intent and business unit intelligence and targeting work and short-term implementation work. But the business practices are going to actually be different. And the only one that holds steady in terms of the business practices is going to be strategic intent. Strategic intent by way of business practice is going to look the same for, an executive than it does for example, a service center leader or an operational line supervisor. And that's because, when you look at intent and you look at what it includes, vision, mission, and values, those are things about where are we headed, why is it important to us, and how do we think about success. You can't
Sure.
have different answers for that, as an executive leader as you would have for, like I said, that operational line supervisor. So strategic intent and its practices are going to hold steady. Those senior leaders are going to be responsible for unpacking it and ensuring that those things are there. All of those other leaders are going to be responsible for being able to understand it in not just vision, mission, and values, but competitive landscape where we play, value proposition, how we're going to win, how ready we are for these things. Why? Because it's those other leaders that have to use their own language to describe it for their teams, right? So does that answer your question,
Yeah.
Rob?
Yes. Yeah, for sure. Definitely.
Yep. And so if you went into, for example, the intelligence quadrant of Rejuvi sales, matter of fact, just get out my little modeling work, you are not going to see purpose, environment framing, people capability, people capacity, and structure for the sales leader. But what you are going to see are things like, yes, still purpose. What's our role in making
Yeah.
strategic intent happen? But then it's going to be moving into an understanding of market data and the current sales data and the segmentation data in terms of who you're targeting for the future. So all of those things start to change at the all the other product suites,
Yeah.
because again, everybody that sits on the modern leadership bench is being asked to lead something, and therefore these models have to be relevant to them and the work that they're paid to do every day.
Yeah, and I like that it's not a one size fits all approach of,
Mhm.
you
Yeah,
know,
yeah.
while the, I think of the intent quadrant there as kind of the foundation, right? That
Mhm.
you're laying, that's where you lay the groundwork for, what are we doing? Why are we here?
Mhm.
Those types of decisions that should align through the organization. But then as you look at different types of leaders, as you start to move to intelligence, target, and implement, we all have different things that we're trying to do to
Mhm.
accomplish, the objectives, right? So it
Mhm.
is nice to see that, a sales leader isn't going to have the same list of items in the rest of the team drivers quadrants that um, a service leader is going to have or an operational line leader would have, because they all have different well, they're all leading different things, different teams, different types of teams.
Right. Yeah. Um, So, all right. So here's a question that I have for you, and it gets to why our title today, Take the Village Team, and we've talked about some concepts of Rejuvi analytics or like superfood. It's like honey from bees. And the idea of we've designed our analytics and our reporting to have this compounding interest for not only leaders, but also teams. So that had to start with modeling because the modeling has to, just like you said, it can't, it's not one size fits all. It has to be custom for these leaders, but then the analytics have to be superfood for them. So just now look at this. We are looking at a real output report. This is a team of 11 people. And what we know from these 11 people, and again, they're using the product called Rejuvi Lead, is that these are all directors on up inside of an organization. And we know that this team, 8 of the 11 have a strength in that northwest corner called implement, right?
Yep.
And then we have 3 of the 11 actually somewhere in those other 3 quadrants. Tell me a little bit about what you think it would be like to work in this organization where the executives, 80% of the executives have a strength that is about implementation, and it's about short-term priorities and goals. It's about how far and fast do we go? How do we ensure success? Can we bring
Yep.
everyone along? What do you think it'd be like to work for this team?
I think I think it's probably a pretty common um thing to see. It's I think it would be um you would get the feeling that yeah, you get things done. We're able to, you know, whether it's a project or goals or,
Yep.
even making the priorities and getting the right priorities, what to look at first, what to work on first, second, third. Um, it feels like, yeah, there's a lot of strength there, but then what I would say too is on the flip side of that, um, maybe it's a bit more traditional, um, kind of older school thinking, command and control type environment where, the as being a part of that team, do you really know what the overall objectives are? Where are we really trying to go? I know the things that I'm working on, what I'm working on, and I know that things are getting done, but where are we really going at the end of the day with all of this?
Mhm.
Um, I think I feel like I've been in a lot of organizations like that, right?
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
a lot
Well,
of
I really want to echo the first thing. I mean, there's no right or wrong profile, right?
right,
There's no right or wrong profile. There's just awareness of, who you are as a team, right?
yeah,
And the compounding interest you can or can't create for all of the folks that you are leading inside of your function. So, I resonate with a couple of things that you said, and one of them is that you think this is probably pretty common. And so for those of us who are, for those of you who are joining us today, if you look at kind of the intent to implement this kind of, I'm going to circle it, this kind of corridor, you know, to have most of your leaders kind of falling into that corridor is pretty common because that's how we have trained our leaders to be, right? And you've heard me say this, Rob, is that I believe that inside of organizations, business planning is driven by accounting cycles. And some people will, some people will challenge me a little bit on that, but I push pretty hard because I haven't yet to be in an organization where their planning cycles aren't started because the accounting units, the finance units are starting to think about how do we start to forecast and wrap up for year X and then start to plan for year Y. That's how it works.
Right.
So organizations are starting to, have typically said, okay, let's provide some direction. Let's make our vision and mission known and what our priorities are for the next year. And then let's have teams focus in on, like what is the work that they have to get done in the next year to make it happen and how much it's going to cost. This is exactly how we've taught our leaders to be. And so like I said, I really love that you said that this is pretty common because this is who we've trained our leaders to be. And so as people are working through their Rejuvi analytics and starting to create their Rejuvi modern leadership profiles, most organizations are finding that this is kind of how it looks, right? That
Right.
most of their people do tend to be pretty strong on implementation, where they're helping people to kind of get things done. But there's a compounding problem with that, right? There's a take the village team problem with that. And that is that organizations don't just want to know how do we get things done. Organizations want to know and teams want to know how do we provide sustainable growth over time? How do we
Right.
innovate? And how do we help our teams to start to, and all of the folks start to think about identifying opportunities and the subsequent targeting of new ways of working. Well, that is this quadrant, this other quadrant, right? Intelligence and targeting, which is brand new, to the leadership development world. And so I just think that being able to go back to some of this opening stories that we shared at the start of this is that I'm going to get Vid's comment out here, is that, you know, when we built Rejuvi's modeling and we built Rejuvi's analytics and reporting to help you to understand what your profile was in relationship to that modeling, we sure, of course, built it for leaders. And just like you talked about, we built it for leaders that are sitting on a modern bench, and you cannot have a one size fits all. So
Right.
if you're a sales leader, you need to be looking at the team drivers report, for your critical business practices. If you are an operational line leader, you better be looking at the Rejuvi team drivers report, right? So that's one thing. But we also built it for their teams to take a look at, because the entire leadership team should start to look at this and start to understand, wow, this is the honey, this is the culture that we are creating for the people around us. And what is it going to feel like, for example, if all of these leaders have strengths that are only focused on the get the work done, and only 20% of our leaders are focused on the other 75% of modern leadership, right?
Right.
It is modern leadership and analytics is like superfood. I'm going to stop sharing verbs. It's like superfood for the team,
Yeah.
but you actually have to move to that modeling, and you have to move to the analytics that support it, and you have to get that feedback to the teams.
Yeah, I agree. What's interesting is when you look at when you showed that and looking at that and talking about business cycles and forecasting, and a lot of my life is spent in that realm. And when I look back at my experience, I get the sense that a lot of what I've been a part of for a long time, for most of my career, is you're just working from cycle to cycle. You're
Mhm.
just getting from this planning cycle to the next planning cycle, and hoping that you find something in between that helps you, either whether it's some product development or new customer base or something that you
Yeah.
find along the way. Um, but when you look at it in this context, you can actually see, okay, well, if I'm not working at all in that quadrant, or I'm maybe I'm not stagnating, maybe I'm still creating growth, but maybe I'm not using my time and team and talents in the best way. Where
Yeah.
if I'm able to go back and spend some time in those other quadrants and building that skill set, what does that do? Back to the compounding part, right? You know,
Mhm.
as you start to feed that to the team, they start to eat that, and they start to enter that starts to energize them. That starts to
Oh my
help
God.
push
I
the
love
team
that.
even further faster.
Mhm. I love that so much. It kind of, I held that note and now it'll be a bigger picture. Here I am with my paper again. But it goes back to, honeybees themselves, bees actually eat the honey as well, right?
Right.
So I love this whole concept of, in order to break out of kind of this, cycle to cycle approach to leadership, right? That is how we've taught our leaders to be. You just need a different model. You need a little bit of honey, right? In order to shift you to those additional quadrants. And it's not like it's now, I don't know if you know this quote from Legally Blonde, but it's not like it's hard. What, like it's hard? It's
Right.
it's 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 so definable, right? And
Yeah.
so I'm just gonna share my screen for just a moment again. Like here, Elle Woods is saying, what, like it's hard? Being able to push out of the cycle to cycle a mindset that we have of going from long-term vision, mission, and values to short-term kind of get it done, it's not as hard as you think. You just need to know what that actually looks like. And there are modern leadership companies, Rejuvi, of course, that can help you to understand what that other work is in order to help you to start to do the work of business unit intelligence, to do the work of midterm targeting, so that, your organizations, again, are not only compassionately and humanly led, but they're fiercely and businessly led as well.
What I would say too, that makes those planning cycles easier
Yeah.
in the long run,
Mhm.
because you're not going, okay, I just got through that cycle, now I have to think about the next cycle, so now what are we going to do? You're continually thinking about, okay, what's next, where are we going, what do we need to be looking at?
Yeah.
If I'm a sales organization, what territories or markets am I not in that we should be looking at? And it's not so much just saying, okay, well, here's the markets and go do it. It's really getting that understanding of what that means, and how it aligns to the overall, um,
Mhm.
strategic intent of the team and the organization.
Mhm. I think that more and more chief financial officers who usually are leading those cycle to cycle processes are actually saying the same sort of thing, Rob, right? Where they're
Hmm. Yep.
taking more responsibility to say, we've got to find a way to move out of this cycle to cycle kind of thinking approach. Um, and finally shift from business planning as this one and done, once a year flurry of activity to kind of an ongoing way of how you do your work,
Right.
right? Yeah.
Exactly. Yep.
Okay. So we have one more thing that we want to do today, and this is about, again, taking the village team and the fact that modern leadership and its quick to insight capability isn't just for the leader. There's compounding interest for the team. And now we are far enough along at Rejuvi in our commercial existence where we can start to say, well, what's happening to these teams, that have been taken to the village. Right? Right? What happens when somebody starts to get inspired saying, hey, yeah, let's take the village team. Let's push out of this cycle to cycle mentality and start to think more holistically about what leadership looks like for all the people that we're asking to lead. Let's start thinking more holistically about what leadership, how we're communicating what leadership is and what business planning can actually look like for these teams. What are some of the results? And so if you just give me a moment, I'm going to shift now to a document and I'll share my screen. Okay, tell me when you can see it.
Yep.
Okay. And again, folks, these are documents that are all available through the Rejuvi platform inside of the function called Resources to Go. We just downloaded it and have it up on screen just to save a little bit of time here. But this is something I want to put up to talk about, okay, let me see this works. There we go. Okay, there's it's a little bit of a different picture than the team drivers report that we have set up, but this is more of the combined model. So again, you're going to see that backward Z starting from intent, moving to the left, business unit intelligence, going up to the northeast target, and then finishing with the northwest and implement. And kind of in the middle is the basic modeling for how you become a compassionate human leader, see, no, do, or some people call it head, heart, and hands. So what happens when a leader took the team, right? What happened when a leader was willing to say, hey, listen, I'm going to embrace this. I'm going to I'm going to start working on this more holistic approach to running the business. I'm going to take accountability for what the analytics said in the example that we were looking at, which was we had 80% of this leadership team being strong implementers. What happened when they said, okay, let's work on all of our capability? I want to share a couple of results. And by the way, these are actual results. So a couple of things here. The first thing that this team found out was that when they worked on their capability, they had that honey, right? Is that when they improved that north hemisphere, so you could think about that target and implement, right? When they increased their capability in that type of leadership by 1%, that actually decreased their associate turnover by 9%. I was like, wow,
Yeah.
Now, okay, so that's cool, but that's not the only thing that happened to them. And I think it's really important to start there because we know, for example, this particular team, had 80% of their leaders who were strong in implement. So kind of what we're saying is when they went implement and target, those things went up by an additional percent. Then we saw the associate turnover go down by 9%. But my thing is could you get more? Like, could you take associate turnover and could you get more by doing some other things? Because we already know that this team was strong at implementation. And sure enough, they did, right? So they found out that when they worked on the South Hemisphere, which is, the intent and the intelligence quadrants, they actually decreased their associate turnover by 17%. So
Right.
what that means to me is it's so worth it to bust out of that cycle to cycle mentality that we're in,
Yeah.
and to start to take on these other quadrants that haven't really been part of our method of helping leaders to become better. I think that is just like so interesting, don't you? That's like crazy good.
Yeah. That's amazing. That's yeah. Back to the compounding comment, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Exactly. So that this is not all that this team learned. And so the thing that I think is interesting to point out here is that most people would say, Oh, I get that. Intuitively, there is this, it makes sense, right? Um, you make yourself a better leader, you push out of these cycles and you're going to impact these people KPIs like turnover, right? That makes some sense. But that's not the only thing that happens when you have good leadership, right? And you can, when you own your attribute level data, can start to run this. This is another thing this company found. When they increase just that quadrant called implement, which by the way does pull on some know capability and some do capability of the leader, their market share in like a defined region, like in a territory, actually increased by 0.5%, you know. And can you imagine just being able to increase in a 6-month period, an increase in market share in a region by 0.5% just because you increased a quadrant of leadership, a chunk of leadership capability by
Right.
1%? It's fantastic, right? And another thing that this unit learned was when they pushed out, and before I want to talk about this before I put it up, is when they start to work on that kind of new outside of the cycle to cycle thinking, intelligence and target, it's that new corridor of modern leadership, something really interesting happened. When they increased that capability by 1%, their net new clients increased by 5%. So I love this data for so many reasons. I think one is because, this would be, would be really interested in your perspective on this. I can see we're almost out of time, so I'll kind of wrap up. But, so many times when you talk about improving the modern leadership capability of an organization, it's hard to get past into an intuitive understanding of
Right.
what that will actually do for the organization. But in modern leadership and modern leadership platforms, you can move from an intuitive understanding of what it should do, to an empirical understanding of what it actually does, right? It
Right.
is superfood. And it's
Yeah.
not just empirical superfood. It is our intuitive empirical superfood. It is empirical. I'm screwing that up. It is not just intuitive superfood. It is
it's
empirical superfood.
it's yeah, to me it's a game changer, right? It's you're taking true KPIs and then able to show that by focusing on certain parts of your leadership, um, you know, attributes that you can drive significant change.
Right.
And
Significant.
it's not about just focusing on implement, for example. Yeah, if you focus on implement, yes, you get some results, but then you see the bigger changes and much more impactful changes when you see movement in the other quadrants as well.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Well, I don't think I could summarize it any better. And I'm going to actually just pull out again to wrap things up for folks today. Rob and I just are so glad that you're here to join us in this conversation called Take the Village Team. And we thought a lot about, this title and the photo that's with it. And, you know, honey is superfood. And not only for humans, it's superfood for bees. And modern leadership and analytics are superfood. We've designed it that way.
Mhm.
It's not only the modeling, it's the analytics. And the modeling analytics are compounded because it is, or are compounding because it helps not just, for example, senior leaders, it helps every single leader because the modeling has been done for all of these leaders who are being asked to do something today.
Right.
But the results of it now can be tracked in a incremental growth. How are we growing this capability incrementally? And what are we learning about all the parts and pieces of the growth and how that correlates to or causates to all of the outcomes that our organization cares about? People-based metrics, operational based metrics and value based metrics. That's taking the village team. That's superfood. That's Rejuvi, right?
That is exactly.
That's Rejuvi. I have so much fun. You and I always, you and I are both introverts. We always get, when we do a call together, we always like, okay, how are we going to fill this time? And it never surprises us that there
Yeah.
we are. We're 2 minutes over, but good fun, really good fun to be with you today. Glad that you have the Rejuvi 45 uniform on today. It's fantastic that we look alike.
Well, thanks for having me again, Reg. It was fun.
Yeah, sounds good. Everyone, thank you for being here today. Our next session is actually scheduled on Independence Day. The first Thursday in July is Independence Day. So we will not be recording live that day, but we will be releasing a pre-recording, and that one will be called Make It Quick. Again, pre-recorded because of Independence Day. So until that time, have a fantastic end of June. Happy Independence Day, and we will see you next time.